Today, I will read a book called A Very Merry Christmas in the Geronimo Stilton series, and let's go right into it. Christmas time is always special. It was winter in Umel City, the capital of Mouse Island, and the weather outside was frightful. Sitting at my desk one chilly evening, I gazed out my window at the snowflakes falling softly over the city. Oh, I almost forgot to introduce myself. My name is Stilton, Geronimo Stilton. I'm the publisher of the Rodents Gazette, the most famous newspaper here on Mouse Island. I shivered and put my paws upon the space heater I kept under my desk. Sometimes it felt as if winter would go on forever. Brr, I hate cold weather. But then I remembered something that cheered me up. Christmas was just a few days away. Christmas. It was my favorite holiday. Just thinking about Christmas reminded me of all the things I had to do. Holy cheese, my list was almost as long as Santa's. I still had to decorate my mouse hole, buy last-minute gifts, and figure out the holiday menu. There were so many delicious treats to eat at Christmas time. Candy canes, roasted chestnuts, toasted cheese balls, visions of cheese puffs. As I sat there daydreaming about the magic of Christmas, the door burst open and my grandfather, William Shorepaw, stomped in. He shoved his snout within an inch of mine and shouted, "Wake up! Are there visions of these cheese puffs dancing in your head, grandson? Wake up!" I almost jumped out of my fur. "No, of course not." "Well, what do you mean by visions of cheese puffs?" I was thinking about the menu for Christmas dinner, and cheese puffs would certainly be delicious. "I know it's almost Christmas, but that's no excuse for daydreaming," Grandfather thundered. "Geronimo, I want you to focus on business, on the newspaper. It doesn't run itself, you know. This paper needs a leader with new ideas, not one who naps on the job." He pointed to a plaque that hung up from the wall. It said, "The wise mouse wastes neither time nor cheese." Then he tapped his paw on my snout a couple of times. "Knock, knock, anybody home?" He picked up the phone and called Miss Raven, one of the assistants on staff. He boomed, "Miss Raven, please send a memo to everybody at the Rodents Gazette. The wise mouse wastes neither time nor cheese. Sign it, William Shorepaw." I sighed. "Don't get your tail in a twist, Grandfather. Even if you don't sign it, everyone will know the memo comes from you." And it was true. No one else would be so obnoxious. Well, if I didn't pop in from time to time to see how things are going, this paper would be about as successful as moldy cheese at an early rat special, Grandfather sniffed. Suddenly he brightened up. "Oh, I almost forgot what I came here to tell you. I had a great idea." Uh-oh, that made me a little worried. You see, my grandfather really was a brilliant mouse, but his great ideas always seemed to get me into trouble. "You had a great idea?" I repeated nervously. "Yes," he exclaimed. "This year the entire Stilton family will spend Christmas." He paused and gave me a sly look. I knew he was just trying to make the moment more dramatic, but the anticipation was driving me crazy. "Where, Grandfather?" "New York? Why New York?" "New York? Why New York?" I asked. Grandfather smiled. "Because my best friend, Klondike MacMouse, lives in New York. I met him a long time ago when traveling around the world for the Rodents Gazette. Which reminds me, grandson, you should be out there sniffing out news stories instead of here warming your tail in that crusty chair." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but before I could squeak a word, Grandfather cut me off. "Well, anyway, Klondike invited us to spend Christmas with his family. He lives in a fantastic apartment overlooking Central Park." This is the letter, right? The MacMouse family, the information of them. He waved a letter and a photo under my snout. "But Grandfather, we always celebrate Christmas at Leal Mouse in New Mouse City," I protested. "It's tradition. We've been doing it for years." Grandfather snorted. "Geronimo, traditions are made to be broken. Besides, you always say that it's exciting to discover different customs and cultures and have to have new experiences." I twitched my tail anxiously. You had a good point there. You're right, Grandfather, I said, but maybe we should have Christmas at my place and then we can travel. Grandfather William cut me off. Nothing doing, Geronimo. It's all arranged. The rest of the family has already agreed to go to New York. My whiskers drew. Really? I couldn't believe no one had told me. I was always the last to know the big family news. Well, of course, if everyone else wants to go, then there's nothing to squeak about. Suddenly, the door burst open and the entire family raced into my office. Uncle Geronimo, did you hear? My nephew Benjamin squealed. We're spending Christmas in New York. You're all leaving tomorrow. This is Geronimo Stilton's family. A tradition Christmas at Geronimo's house. All his families are here. I smiled down at my favorite nephew and tried to sound enthusiastic. Yes, Grandfather just told me. You'll spend Christmas in New York. It'll be great. Everybody was excited. They were all squeaking at once, happily making plans for the trip. As for myself, I started for home. That night, I went to bed early. I was depressed. You see, I was worried that I hadn't organized fun Christmases at my household. That had to be the reason everyone was so excited to spend Christmas in New York. Maybe my cooking wasn't tasty enough for family gourmets. Maybe my decorations weren't creative enough for the family artists. Maybe my gifts weren't fun enough for the family mouselings. Yes, it was all my fault everyone wanted to go to New York for Christmas instead of spending it at our beloved home in New York City. I had been a terrible host, and I had no one but myself to blame. I lay awake for a very long time, feeling miserable. Finally, I curled up into a fur ball and fell asleep. A trip to the Big Apple. Big Apple is an expression used to describe New York City. The next day, the entire Stilton family left for New York. Everyone except me, that is. I stayed behind until 2 days before Christmas. I had so much work to do at the newspaper that I just couldn't tear myself away before then. On my last afternoon in the office, I wished my co-workers a Merry Christmas. Then I hurried home to prepare for the trip. I put my best suit in my yellow suitcase. Then I packed all the gifts my grandfather had bought for the MacMouse family. Grandson, I want to make a nice impression on the MacMouses, he shouted at me. So don't forget anything. I didn't. I was too scared of him to leave anything behind. Last but not least, I attached a bright blue tag with my name and address to the suitcase handle. That will make it easier for me to find it when I arrived in New York. I scurried into the airport and turned in my bag at the check-in counter. The agent took it with a smile. You can pick up your luggage in New York, Mr. Stilton. No need to worry. I thanked him and headed to the gate where my plane was waiting. Half an hour later, I boarded the plane and my trip was underway. I settled into my seat and pulled out a tourist guide to New York. Then I got out a map of the city and looked for the MacMouse's house. The Tale of New York. New York City, also known as the Big Apple, is one of the biggest cities in the world. Many consider it the center of business and finance, entertainment and fashion, and media and education. The Lenape inhabited the region when the Europeans began to explore the area in 1524. The Italian navigator Giovanni da Verrazzano was the first European to enter New York Bay. Then in 1625, Dutch fur merchants formed a settlement called New Amsterdam as the main town of their colony, New Netherland. In 1664, the English conquered the colony and renamed the New York in honor of the Duke of York, the future King James II. From 1785 to 1790, New York City was the capital of the United States. It was also the capital of New York State until 1797. Today, this great metropolis is an important road financial center, and it is the biggest city in the United States. It is also one of the most popular tourist spots in the world. Places of interest in New York, which is also called NY. New York City is made up of 5 boroughs: Manhattan, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. Manhattan, the island between the Hudson River and the East River, is the heart of the city. It has the most famous and interesting places to visit, including Central Park, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and of course Times Square. It's very easy to get around in New York City. Manhattan looks like a big long checkerboard. It has great big streets and avenues. A Native American trail that cut through the island is still in existence. It is now called Broadway. Manhattan is home to some of the tallest skyscrapers in the world. This is possible thanks to the composition of its subsoil, which is made of hard granite capable of sustaining immense weight without sinking. More than 8 million people from more than 185 different countries live in New York City. They are Africans, Hispanics, Italians, Irish, Chinese, etc. More than 130 different languages are spoken in New York. New York's points of interest: number 1, Wall Street; number 2, Statue of Liberty; number 3, Ellis Island; number 4, Brooklyn Bridge; number 5, Empire State Building; number 6, Times Square; number 7, Grand Central Terminal; number 8, Rockefeller Center; number 9, American Museum of Natural History; number 10, Columbia University; number 11, Central Park. I heard all of these, but I never went there. A yellow bag with a bright blue tag. After a long, bumpy flight, we finally landed at New York's Kennedy Airport, not a moment too soon as far as I was concerned. My paws were so cramped and stiff, I felt like I'd been stuffed inside a tin of miniature cheese snacks. It was morning. The airport was already crowded and incredibly busy. There were tons of rodents scurrying about all over the place. Some had just arrived and others were about to depart. Everyone was in a hurry to get somewhere. After waiting in the long line to get to the immigration counter to have my passport stamped, I headed for the baggage claim area to retrieve my suitcase from Mouse Air, the official airline of Mouse Island. I couldn't wait to get my bag. I was already looking forward to a nice warm bath and something cheesy to munch on at the MacMouse's apartment. I was so tired from the long flight, I felt like I was going to fall asleep on my paws. I kept yawning. Then I saw a yellow bag with a bright blue tag on the baggage carousel, and I got a second wind. I grabbed it and headed for the exit. Okay, the process of going to the exit. Geronimo Stilton. Number 1, at the check-in counter, I checked my yellow bag with Mouse there. There was a bag on the conveyor belt. It's about to be loaded into the airplane that will take me to New York. Number 3, at 9 p.m. my plane takes off. Number 4, at 6 a.m. my plane lands at Kennedy Airport in New York. Exhausted from the long trip, I grabbed the yellow bag from the carousel. Number 6, I headed for the exit with the yellow bag. This isn't my bag! Outside the airport, it was snowing. I hailed a taxi. Then I loaded my suitcase into the trunk and gave the driver the MacMouse's address in Manhattan. Halfway into the city, I realized I didn't have my wallet on me. Holy jeez, I only have my passport and the New York City tourist card in my pocket. I must have left my wallet in my suitcase. I asked the cab driver to pull over. He popped the trunk and I took out the yellow bag. When I opened it, I had a big surprise. Cursed the kitty later, this wasn't my bag. Where were all my clothes? The Christmas gifts for the MacMouses were missing. If I didn't find those gifts, I'd be cheese toast. Grandfather William would make sure of it. Oh no, this isn't my bag, I cried. The cab driver shrugged. That's your problem, not mine. I just want my money. But I don't have a penny on me. My wallet is in my bag, I shrieked. Since I didn't have any money, the cab demanded my beloved gold fountain pen as payment. I didn't dare complain. He was so huge he looked like a sumo rat with massive muscles that looked even bigger when he was mad. He snatched the pen from my paw and climbed back in the cab, slamming the door behind him. The cab zoomed away, leaving skid marks behind it. It wasn't until it had disappeared from sight that I realized it was stranded on the highway. I stood on the side of the road in the snow. I was halfway between the airport and Manhattan. I was miles from home. I was exhausted. I had no money. I had a humongous bag to lug around, and it wasn't even mine. Mrs. Smith's suitcase. I sat at the edge of the highway. I couldn't even make a phone call. I left my cell phone inside my bag. I wanted to cry, but I stood up and straightened my tail. There was only one thing to do. I had to get the bag to its owner and hope that he or she had my back. It couldn't be that hard, could it? I took a better look at the bag. It was yellow just like mine, with a rifle tag. Just like mine. The tag had a name on it. Mrs. A. Smith. Moldy mozzarella. Smith, that had to be the most common name in New York City. There were bound to be hundreds of Smiths. Inside the suitcase there were dresses, makeups, and pantyhose. There were also lots of books and several notebooks filled with notes on ancient Egypt. Was X-ray of a mummy. The rodent who had taken my luggage was an Egyptologist, that is, someone who studies ancient Egyptian civilization. Suddenly I heard ringing from inside the bag. Ring, 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 ring. I grabbed the bag and started digging through it. At the very bottom was a cell phone. Could the rodent whose bag I'd taken by accident be calling me? There was only one way to find out. I answered the phone. Hello, is this Mrs. Smith? This is Stilton, Geronimo Stilton. Yes, this is Mrs. Smith, a female mouse's voice replied. I have her back, I informed her. Well, she probably realized that. How else could I have answered her phone? And I have yours, she chimed. I'll meet you at Colum. Rummaging rattlesnakes, the phone had gone dead. Tears of frustration and exhaustion rolled down my snout. As a note, dear reader, I've had a lot of adventures, but this was turning out to be the most unlucky one yet. After a moment or two, I wiped my eyes. Then I started going through Mrs. Smith's bag. I felt guilty. I never looked through other mice's feelings, but this was different. It was an emergency. In one of the side pockets, I found something that might help me. Mrs. Smith's appointment book. This is what she had planned for the day. When the phone cut off, Mrs. Smith was saying Colum. She must have been saying Columbia University. She had an appointment there at 10 o'clock. If I got there in time, maybe we could exchange bags. Then I'd get the MacMouse's Christmas gifts back, and grandfather would never have to know what had happened. Well, was I a millipede or a mouse? I could do it. I had to. Headlights in the fog. Shivering from the cold, I put one paw in front of the other. I had to get to Manhattan. Cars whizzed by me, coming a little closer than I liked. Rodents here seemed to drive much faster than they did in New York City. In the morning fog, the yellow headlights glimmered like cat's eyes. It was terrifying, but cold and miserable as I was still fascinated by what I saw around me. New York was truly an extraordinary place. The city never slept. It was in a state of constant motion. The snow had stopped. I dragged the yellow bag behind me like a sack of moldy cheese rinds. It left a trail through the brown slush on the side of the road. I kept slipping, but I continued on my way. What else could I do? I considered going to the MacMouse's for help, and I was too embarrassed. No way can I tell grandfather I lost those gifts. I panted as I stepped into a puddle of slush. My fur will be gray and patchy before I hear the end of it. When I got to Manhattan, I looked like I've gone paw to paw with an oversized tabby. I was covered with mud from snout to shoe. I was soaked to the bone. I felt as if I hadn't slept in a week. I hadn't eaten in hours, and I didn't have a penny to my name. My bag was so wet and dirty it was falling apart. But as I looked around me, I couldn't help thinking, holy cheese, what a beautiful city. Too many Smiths! I started walking uptown. I still didn't have a cent for the subway. It was just my luck that Columbia was at the northern end of Manhattan, and I was at the southern end. But when I finished the long trek, it was worth it. What a gorgeous university! Everywhere I looked, there were students bustling about. They looked so studious and so serious. Then I turned to a mouse with fur the color of a bonnie and said, "Good morning, Miss. May I ask you a question?" "Of course," she answered pleasantly. "I'm not quite sure if I can help you, but try me. I'm a professor here. What would you like to know?" Columbia University. Columbia University was founded in 1754 as King's College by the order of King George II of England. It was one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in America. Today, it is mostly known for schools of law, medicine, and journalism. "Well, I'm looking for Mrs. Smith," I began. The professor laughed. "Smith? Do you realize that's the most common name in the United States?" Yes," I answered. "Tell me your first name," the professor suggested. "Maybe that will help." "I don't know it," I confessed. "I only know that it starts with an A." She shook her head. "Like Anna? Or Anastasia? How about Anita? Or Ada? Or maybe Adelaide? Have you any idea how many A. Smiths there are at this university? Where are you from? I can tell you're not a New Yorker." "Yes, I know it's going to be hard finding her," I mumbled. "You see, I was at the airport and I took her back by accident. She has my bag with all my money and my cell phone. I haven't slept or washed or eaten. It was then I started sobbing. I tried to stop myself, but I couldn't. I was just so tired." The professor took pity on me. She offered me a cup of hot cheese and pointed me to a bathroom where I could wash my paws and face. Before she said goodbye, she gave me a new map of her city. "Good luck finding her," she said. "You'll need it." I looked over Mrs. Smith's appointment book and decided to look for her at her next appointment, 11 o'clock at the Empire State Building. Unfortunately, it was nowhere near Columbia. How was I ever going to get there on time? I had only an hour and lots of ground to cover. Up in the Empire State Building. I walked and walked. It seemed like I'd be walking forever. My paws were so cold and sore they'd gone numb. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, I saw a skateboard peeking out of a garbage can. That gave me a brilliant idea. I put the skateboard on the ground and placed one paw on it to see if it would hold. I could probably use this, I muttered. But I didn't get a chance to finish my thought. Another rodent on the sidewalk accidentally bumped into me, and the next thing I knew, I was running along like a hamster on a treadmill. I zoomed through the crowds of New Yorkers screaming, "Help! Get out of the way!" I was whizzing down Broadway, the biggest and most famous street in all of New York. The street seemed to go on forever. At last I came to 34th Street. Somehow I managed to hang a left. Now I was speeding towards 5th Avenue. Skidded to a halt. Whew! I had made it to the Empire State Building without a scratch. Empire State Building. It has 103 floors. Speed of elevator is 600 to 1,000 feet per minute. 73 elevators. 1,454 feet high. 410 days to build it. 6,500 windows. 60,000 tons of steel used to construct it. The second tallest building in the United States. The tallest building in New York City. Built during the Great Depression, the Empire State Building was at the center of an intense competition in New York City to build the world's tallest building. The building has one of the most popular outdoor observatories in the world. From the 86th floor observation deck, visitors can view the entire city. I tried to blend into the crowd of tourists going up to the observatory. The elevator took us up to the 86th floor. We went so high, I could feel my ears popping. She's nebulous. I hate heights. But when I scurried out onto the observation deck, I was stunned. The view left me absolutely breathless. What a magnificent panorama of the city. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to stop and enjoy the sights. I had to look for Mrs. Smith. I saw a mouse with a green jacket and asked, "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Smith?" She shook her snout. The next rodent I kissed my cheek. "No, I'm not Mrs. Smith, but if you want to call me that, you can, my little cutie patootie." I'm sorry," I stammered. "There's been a mistake. There has to be a faster way to find her." So I took a deep breath and shouted, "Mrs. Smith!" Everybody stared at me. I could hear from murmuring, "You can tell he's not a New Yorker." A security guard grabbed me by the ear and dragged me downstairs. "Wash the tail!" I pulled out Mrs. Smith's appointment book, then looked at my watch. The next appointment was at noon in Times Square. If I hurried, I could still make it. I was too fond of my fur to sit a paw on the skateboard again. Fortunately for my story, Times Square was not too far from the Empire State Building. I soon found myself in a beautiful square filled with neon lights, billboards, skyscrapers, and theater marquees, holly trees. The square was so bright, I wished I had sunglasses. Stood still for a moment, trying to catch my breath. I was right outside the fancy hotel with big glass doors. Suddenly, two rodents with smart blue uniforms came rushing out. As they unrolled a long red carpet, they shouted to each other, "Hurry up, will you? She's coming!" I tried asking, Who's coming?" But the carpet knocked me right off my paws. I found myself knelt down onto the pavement as the two dormice rolled the carpet right over my back. A beautiful blonde rodent stepped out of a long, shining limousine. Within seconds, a huge crowd had formed. "That's her! It's really her! Mouse Lena!" someone shouted. The rodent walked slowly along the red carpet, smiling and signing autographs. She was about to step on me, so I said, "Wash the tail!" I meant my tail, but she looked behind her and saw that the tail of her long, elegant gown was caught in the door of the limousine. She smiled and planted a kiss on my cheek. Then she gave me the red rose she was holding. "Thank you, you're my hero." What pushy paws! In seconds, the crowd was swarming all over me like a pack of hungry rats at an all-you-can-eat cheese buffet. Everyone was trying to grab my rose. "It's mine! I saw it first! I'm her biggest fan! It's mine!" they squealed. I had to protect myself. These New York mice were such pushy paws, so I let the two dormice roll me up in carpet, and they took me safely into the hotel. As I scrambled out, I could hear the crowd muttering angrily. I didn't have time to worry about what a bunch of crazy rat-ratsy thought of me. I was a mouse on a mission, but I realized that in all the confusion, I missed my chance to find Mrs. Smith. She's licensed! Locating Mrs. Smith was turning out to be as easy as tracking down the latest Nintendo game on Christmas Eve. If I had any hope of finding her, I had to hurry to her next appointment, 1 o'clock at Rockefeller Center. I was late. I raced along like I had a hungry cat at my heels. My paws ached, my back was sore, and my heart was beating so fast it sounded like one of those Spangled drummers back in Times Square. Even so, I arrived at Rockefeller Center. 10 minutes late, panting. I collapsed on top of Mrs. Smith's yellow bag. I had to sit down before my paws gave out. Rockefeller Center. Rockefeller Center is a city within a city. This building complex has gardens, stores, restaurants, and offices. It's also home to the biggest Christmas tree in all of New York. The tree is lit right after Thanksgiving to kick off the holiday season. When I looked up, I saw the hugest, most fabulous Christmas tree ever. It was set above a beautiful skating rink crowded with rodents of every age, shape, and fur color. They were all bundled up in heavy parkas and colorful hats. "Mrs. Smith, are you here?" I shouted to the crowd. "Mrs. Smith!" No one answered. The fright of a lifetime. I looked at my watch. It was later than I thought. Mrs. Smith must already be on her way to her next appointment, 2 o'clock at the American Museum of Natural History. I sighed and picked up the yellow bag. Then, with my head hanging and my tail dragging between my legs, I headed toward the museum. When I arrived, I realized I had a big problem. I didn't have any money for the entrance fee, I almost cried. But then I caught a break. Right near the museum's front door stood a cleaning cart. I hid the bag behind the plant and scrambled inside the garbage can. A few moments later, a cleaning mouse wheeled me inside the museum. I waited patiently while we clattered along. Then, as soon as it was safe to stick my snout out of the bin, I took a peek outside and got the fright of my life. An enormous skull was staring at me. It was the hugest dinosaur skeleton I had ever seen. I screeched and scurried out of the garbage can. I scrambled into the next room and raised my head to see an enormous willow that looked as if it was about to fall on top of me. I just couldn't take it anymore. Now in my weak and hungry state, I fainted. A member of the museum staff revived me with extra stinky smelling cheeses. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked. I nodded weakly. "Some mice do find our dinosaur bones are model well, a little overwhelming," she said kindly. "Dinosaur bones? Model well? Of course! This was a natural history museum after all. I should have realized that weren't real." No sleep to the Brooklyn Bridge! I didn't know if I could go on. I was exhausted, but I couldn't give up now. I had to prove myself. If I didn't get those gifts back, Grandfather would never let me forget it. I retrieved the yellow bag and strode out of the museum with my snout held high. I checked the time. I could still make it to the next appointment if I hurried. I hailed a taxi and offered the driver my gold watch in exchange for a ride to the Brooklyn Bridge. "Step on it. I'm in a hurry," I told him. The cab driver took off like a cat burglar fleeing the scene of a crime. "Here we go!" he shouted. I felt like I was trapped in a rat race or 3000 video game. After 10 minutes, I was as pale as this. After 20 minutes, I was as green as broccoli. After 30 minutes, I rolled down the window and lost my cheese. Thanks to the cab's crazy driving, we had already arrived at the Brooklyn Bridge. Today, the Brooklyn Bridge is the second busiest bridge in New York City. Every day, 144,000 vehicles cross the bridge. Each thick steel cable has 5,434 wires that have been twisted together for extra strength. These specially designed cables withstand strong winds, rain, and snow. The bridge weighs 14,680 tons. Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883. It was designed by the German-born architect John A. Roebling. It connects Manhattan to Brooklyn. When the bridge was built, the two brought their separate cities. The Brooklyn Bridge was the first suspension bridge to use steel for its K-wire. What a magnificent sight! It was the most beautiful bridge I'd ever seen. It was easy to understand why it was so famous. As I headed toward the pedestrian path, I noticed the long steel cables supporting the bridge. It was terrifying. What if one of the support cables snaps? I thought, getting panicky. What if one of the planes crumbles? What if a hurricane comes sweeping by? I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed at the top of my lungs. "Mr. Smith, where are you?" All the rodents on the bridge stared at me disapprovingly. Fortunately for me, a big group of tourists arrived at the exact moment. Desperate to avoid the stares of everyone around me, I hustled into the middle of their group. I was so humiliated I turned red from the tip of my snout to the end of my tail. In fact, I think I set a new record for most embarrassing moments in a single day. Oh, how I wish I was back in my nice cozy mouse hole with a nice cup of hot cheese by my side. Lady Liberty. For once on this awful day, at a stroke of luck, the tourists were heading toward the ferry that sailed to the Statue of Liberty. That was where Mrs. Smith was heading for her next appointment. But of course, I still didn't have any money to pay my fare. All I had in my pocket was a biscuit and an old crust of cheese. So I went to the ferry's captain, a huge rodent with paws as big as a cat's, and told him I didn't have money for a ticket, but that I desperately needed to get to Libertyland. The captain looked at me appraisingly. "You don't, huh? Well, let's see what you can do with you." The captain rubbed his paws together in anticipation. "I've got it! Take that oversized mop and start struggling the dick. Make it shine. If I'm totally satisfied, I'll pay for your ticket to get into Statue of Liberty." Smile down at me. "Today's your lucky day." "I'll do it," I told the captain. I picked up the mop and began to swab the dick. A few minutes later, I looked up from my work. There she was. The famous Lady Liberty was emerging through the fog. Okay, the information of it. The Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty is a symbol of freedom of millions of people. The artist Frederick Auguste Bartholdi sculpted the statue. The interior was engineered by Gustave Eiffel, the designer of the Eiffel Tower. The people of France donated the statue to the people of the United States in 1886 to commemorate 100 years of American independence. The seven rays in the crown represent the seven seas and the seven continents: Asia, yes, I live in Asia, Africa, Australia, Europe, Antarctica, North America, and South America. The touch symbolizes enlightenment. The tablet Lady Liberty holds is inscribed July 4, 1776 with the numbers in Roman numbers. The day of the United States declared its independence from England. At the floor of the statue there are broken chains not seen here. They symbolize freedom from oppression and slavery. Natural Liberty is 305 feet tall. I don't know if it changed to centimeters or meters. Okay, here's Geronimo Stilton. Let's find out. When I finished cleaning, the deck was as shiny as the top of another famous New York monument, the Chrysler Building. The captain must have been pleased because he gave me a friendly pat on the back and almost dislocated my shoulder. This is America, young man. Go, climb the statue and look to your future. I decided to follow his advice. I disembarked and headed toward the statue. She was even more beautiful close up. With the yellow bag in tow, I got in line for the elevator that would take me up the base of the statue to Lady Liberty's feet. And Holly Cheese was still lying along. It seemed like every road in New York City was in line with me. I would be waiting for hours to get an elevator to the top. Without my gold pocket watch, I had no idea what time it was. Excuse me, do you have the time? Asked the rodent standing behind me. 3:30, she replied. Moldy mozzarella. Mr. Smith had probably come and gone. I let out a squeak of frustration. Would I ever see my bag again? There was one way to find out. Only one way to find out. I had to make it to Central Park by 4 p.m. Central Park. I can't begin to tell you what I had to do to get back to Manhattan. First, I had to scrub the deck of the ferry again. Then I slogged along through the wet, heavy snow. My paws were so sore that they looked like they'd gone through a cheese grater. I paused on the street corner to catch my breath. I was so tired I had to use the yellow suitcase to support myself. A sanitation worker took pity on me and offered me a ride uptown on the back of his garbage truck. I couldn't afford to be choosy, so I pinched my nose and scurried on board. What a stench! Got to Central Park on time, but it smelled like a garbage can. I had to find Mrs. Smith here. I just had to. Then I'd finally be able to go to the MacMouse's apartment and relax. I started daydreaming about how my relatives would happily welcome me. I'd take a nice hot bubble bath. I'd eat some delicious warm food. The information of Central Park. Central Park was the first landscape park in the United States. It was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux in 1857. The park measures 843 acres and has more than 500,000 trees and shrubs, amid its rocky outcroppings, hills, lakes, and meadows. Unfortunately, I was so busy daydreaming, I forgot to look where I was going. Before you could say visions of cheese puffs, I was trampled by a group of runners. As they stomped on my aching tail, I heard them say, "Who's that? What's he doing blocking the road like that? You can tell he's not a New Yorker." I was too weary and numb to feel a thing. The last thought was, "Holly Cheese, New Yorkers are tough. They jog in the snow." Then for the second time that day, I fainted. On the streets of New York. When I came to, I was all alone. It was getting dark. The paths in Central Park were deserted. I had lost my last chance to find Mrs. Smith. Dejected, depressed, and despondent, I aimlessly wandered the streets of New York. The city looked like a fairyland with Christmas lights everywhere twinkling against a blanket of new snow. Rodents everywhere were shouting, "Merry Christmas!" Scores of little mice went around merrily singing Christmas carols. Jingle bells, jingle bells. It seemed like there was a rodent dressed as Santa Claus in every corner. They rang bells and bellowed, "Merry Christmas! Happy holidays to all!" Everybody was happy. Everybody except me. Everyone was hurrying home to celebrate with their family. Everybody except me. Everybody had a place to go. Everybody except me. I never felt lonelier in my life. I found myself at a beautiful circle with a huge state of Columbus at the center. That moment, ideas struck me like a lightning bolt. With new hope, I took out Mrs. A. Smith's appointment book. I looked closer at the last appointment that my tear had erased. What did Colum mean? I thought it must mean Columbia University, but it could also mean Columbus Circle, one of the most famous landmarks in Manhattan. I looked around trying to get my bearings. Yes, this was Columbus Circle. It was one of the corners of Central Park. It suddenly dawned on me that MacMouse lived on Columbus Circle. I couldn't remember the address, but I remembered what the building looked like. I'd seen it in a photo Grandfather William had shown me, and still hated this idea of confessing my mistake to Grandfather William, but fate had brought me right to him. So what choice did I have? The only thing to do was to find the MacMouse's building and ask for help. I walked around and around Columbus Circle until I finally recognized the MacMouse's building. It was an enormous skyscraper gleaming with shiny mirrors, glass doors, and brightly lit windows. Timid as a mouse, I pushed open the door. As it swung open, a gust of warm wind enveloped me. It felt so good to be in a warm place. The dormouse, a tall and muscular rat, was dressed in a fancy red uniform with gold epaulets on his shoulders. With an air of superiority, he stuck his snout in my face and asked, "Who are you?" I could hardly blame him for being so scornful. I was bedraggled. I smelled like a garbage truck, but I tried to maintain my dignity nonetheless. I'm a guest of the MacMouses. He stared at my soggy fur, my mud-soaked clothes, the dirty back, and the glint of desperation in my eyes. Then he snorted. "Yeah, right. The likes of you, a guest of the MacMouses." I tried pleading with him. "Please, would you let the MacMouse know I am here? My name is Stilton, Geronimo Stilton. I come from New Mouse City." "Geronimo who?" he said disdainfully. "Where's New Mouse City? I've never heard of it." "My name is Stilton, Geronimo Stilton," I said firmly. "I'm the publisher of the Rodents Gazette, the most famous newspaper on Mouse Island." The dormouse laughed so hard he almost popped the shiny buttons off his uniform. "You're kidding. You, the publisher of a newspaper, and I'm the President of the United States." I took out my soggy business cards. The writing was still readable, though barely. "Would you please bug the MacMouses for me?" I asked him. "Thank you." He still looked suspicious, but he buzzed the MacMouses. "There's a scruffy rodent here who says he's Geronimo Stilton from New Mouse City. He says you've been expecting him." But there was a pause, and then the dormouse's expression changed from scorn to shock. "You've really been expecting him?" "Really?" he asked. He looked me up and down in amazement. "Well, in that case, of course." The dormouse hung up the phone and half-heartedly took his cap off and bowed. "Mr. Stilton, this way, please. Take the elevator to the 34th floor." Geronimo Stilton, Mrs. A. Smith. I dragged myself and the yellow bag to the elevator. I no longer cared that I lost the gifts. Not even the prospect of facing my grandfather bothered me. All I cared about now was taking a nice long bubble bath and stuffing some cheese in my snout, not necessarily in that order. I pressed a button for the 34th floor. While the elevator was going up, I started thinking about what I say to the MacMouses and my grandfather. Finally, the elevator door opened. I found myself in an immense room decorated with elegant furniture and brightly colored Christmas decorations. It was filled with lots of smiling rodents. Among the many happy faces was my grandfather. I threw myself on my knees before him. "Grandfather, please forgive me. I lost the bag with all the MacMouse's gifts." My grandfather opened his mouth to squeak, but before he could say a word, someone interrupted him. What do you mean? A pleasant-sounding voice asked. The gifts are right there. Here. A friendly-looking young rodent came toward me. She was carrying a yellow bag just like the one I still had clutched in my palm. Attached to the bag's handle was a bright blue tag that said Geronimo Stilton. It was my suitcase. It's, I stuttered. Cheesecake. Are you Mrs. A. Smith? The rodent laughed. Yes, I'm Mrs. A. Smith, and you're Geronimo Stilton, right? I was almost struck speechless. Yes, I'm Stilton, Geronimo Stilton, I finally answered. What are you doing at the MacMouse's house? I'm Annabelle MacMouse Smith, Klondike MacMouse's daughter, he explained. I married Coconut Smith. A smiling rodent with dark fur approached and I shook my paw. Hi, I'm Coconut Smith, Annabelle's husband. Welcome, Geronimo. We've been waiting for you since this morning. I was flabbergasted. I don't understand. What do you mean you've been waiting for me since this morning? My grandfather couldn't. Still daydreaming, grandson. Wake up and smell the chitter. My friend Klondike's daughter arrived home this morning. In the suitcase, we found it was not hers. I recognized it immediately. It was your bag. Annabelle tried calling you to tell you to come immediately to Columbus Circle. I couldn't believe it. All day long, I've been thinking I'd never find A. Smith. The Smith was too common a name, and she'd been under my snuff the whole time. The phone battery went dead, and you never got the full message, my grandfather read on. We've been waiting for you all day. We got here just in time for Christmas Eve dinner. But your appointment book has been going someplace different every hour. Why was your schedule so packed? I asked Annabelle. He smiled. I thought I'd take you around New York and show you some of the most interesting sights. But it looks like you've already done that by yourself. I guess I have. I wouldn't necessarily recommend my way to other tourists, but I've certainly seen the city from top to bottom. And now that I was nice and warm and with family and friends again, I could almost laugh about it. Almost. It certainly had been an adventure. Merry Christmas to all! While the Stiltons and the MacMouses were celebrating Christmas, I gazed out the enormous picture window overlooking Central Park. The snow-covered trees seemed to go on forever. It was a magical sight. Fluffy flakes danced through the air and settled gently on the newly fallen snow. Those snowflakes reminded me of home. The snow that fell in New York was the same as the snow falling over New York. It just goes to show the things that really matter are the same everywhere. All over the road, the heart of every mouth asked for the same thing, happiness. I turned back toward the rodents in the room. There was nothing that could make me happier than I was at this moment. My family and friends around me. Stretching out my arms, I called out, Merry Christmas to all of you! I turned to the MacMouses. Thank you for including us in your holiday celebration. It's wonderful to make such marvelous new friends. Then I turned to my family, and it's fabulous to be back with my family. It wouldn't be Christmas if we couldn't all be together today. I love y'all. My sister and Benjamin rushed over and gave me a big hug. Even my grandfather came over to embrace me. Holy cheese, this was turning out to be one of the best Christmas ever. Okay. Those are some whys about how to make gingerbread cookies, colorful Christmas trees, brownies. Okay, that's all. The next book is Geronimo's Valentine, and if I get the opportunity to read this book, I will upload it. I'll read this book, and it is Merry Christmas. I'm uploading this book on Christmas because this is a Christmas book. So, again, happy holidays, and I hope I can see you in the next one. Merry Christmas!